So I'm going to start off with a nice little quote here that will encourage you to consider playing music. It's from a guy called Brian Finnegan. He says, "There's no other profession in the world where you can get to meet such amazing characters, the real people of the country that you go to. Music kind of invites you to walk into these lives. They're not great academics or geniuses, they're just ordinary people like you and me. That's the lovely thing about music." So in Ireland, it's thought that music has always been an activity engaged in by people in Ireland. The recent history of Ireland begins about 14,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age there. There's evidence for human activity in Ireland beginning about 12,500 years ago, and those people would have been hunter-gatherers, and it is thought that they possibly came from the lost continent of Atlantis. It is thought that Ireland uh, may have been attached to Atlantis. It may have been a peninsula. Farming took root in Ireland around 6,000 years ago in the New Stone Age or the Neolithic times. Uh, it was a massive revolution in terms of the way of life in Ireland. Farming required deforestation, the introduction of domesticated animals such as goats, cattle, sheep, and grain and root vegetable crops. And the main thing was that people lived in permanent settlements. And a feature of life was ceremony. So originating in that period are the thousands of megalithic features that dot the countryside of Ireland. It's believed that community ceremonies would have involved musical forms, and for me and for many, it's inconceivable that social activity in Ireland would not have involved music and dance. To give you an idea, in Gaelic Ireland, and we're talking about, roughly 4,000 years ago, the Brehon laws, which were the old laws that governed society, those laws included a duty of hospitality on everyone. The duty it included providing fireside entertainment for travellers staying the night, while at this stage there was a group known as hospitalers who ran guest houses or hotels, but they were far and few between. And at that stage it would have been dangerous for people in Ireland to spend the night outdoors. And travelling around the country was an important feature in terms of spreading the culture, spreading news, and sharing. So if a knock came on your door, you were duty bound to let that person in, unless they were an outlaw or somebody that there were certain categories of people you could exclude, but you were expected then to entertain them. So everybody would have been involved in that. Clan leaders were expected to provide entertainment at events, and it was so important that if you were seen as being a person who did not encourage this type of activity and did not hire artists, you could become the object of ridicule, and some famous kings were dethroned. Musicians and other artists were members of staff, and positions were generally hereditary. The king of musicians for a lot of this time was, of course, the harpist. As we know, the harp is the symbol of Ireland. That tradition lasted a number of thousands of years until the early 17th century, when unfortunately Gaelic Ireland was destroyed. I'm going to give you a chance to watch some great session music now. So I'm going to have to limit you to those two, but there's, I think you can see at the bottom there, there's a link. Whoops. There's a link to YouTube, and you'll be able to find those great musicians if you search through, and there's no amount of Irish tunes that you can find on YouTube. Um, so I'm going to go on now and show you and talk to you about some of the ancient musical instruments of Ireland. And in fact, as a general statement, you could say that in Ireland we have over 4,000 years of complex musical playing. Here's some images for you of what's known as the Wicklow pipes. The top photograph there is a photograph of them when they were found, and they're from the period, they've been dated to between 2200 and 2000 BC, and they were discovered in 2003 during an archaeological excavation. There were 6 hand-carved cylindrical pipes fashioned out of yew wood, and they're the world's oldest surviving wooden musical instruments. They range in size from around just under 3 inches to a little over 11 inches long. The pipes were found lying side by side in descending order in a waterlogged trough belonging to an early Bronze Age burn mount. The pipes had been hollowed out internally, but there was no finger holes. The ends of some of the pipes had been worked to a stepped taper, suggesting that the pipes were to form part of a composite wind instrument, such as a bag-fed organ or a pan-pipe-like device. So I'm going to play you another piece here, which is, it'll give you a little bit more detail and some images of those pipes. Ignore the first little piece.
Ancient Ireland, the Wicklow pipes. This is called a Peterson Wicklow pipe. This is not what I'll be talking about today. The Wicklow pipes were recovered in 2003 by Bernice Smalley in a trough in County Wicklow of Ireland. They are believed to be about 4,170 years old, which makes them come from around 2150 BC. There are 6 pipes that go from ascending order from 29 to 52 centimeters, with no evidence of finger holes. Sadly, we don't really know how these were used in the past, but there are 2 ideas, one of them being more like a panpipe, like the Greeks used, and the second one being more like an ancient bagpipe with an airbag at the bottom. Dr. Peter Holmes is in the middle of recreating the Wicklow pipes. Right here is the first prototype that he's made. It apparently sounds really nice, but they're not sure if it's the correct way to use them or not. Right now, this set of pipes is the only one that's been discovered, and they're in the middle of preserving it, so nobody can really get a good look at it for now until they're done. But in conclusion, these are an ancient set of pipes that we don't really know much about and are still trying to figure out what they are and how they sound like.
Now I'm going to introduce you to 2 late Bronze Age horns. That would be the period from 900 to 600 BC. They were discovered in bogs located in County Antrim and County Kerry, and they were made from bronze and were originally cast in clay moulds. And they represent sophisticated pieces of early metalworking, and they were undoubtedly valuable items. So during the late Bronze Age, there were 2 main types of horn in Ireland. One was blown from the end and the other from a side mouthpiece, with both types being illustrated there on slide 10, a couple of slides back. In general, the end blown horns were mainly found in the southwest of Ireland, while the side blown ones have a more even distribution across the country. They appear to have been popular instruments, and to date over 122 have been discovered in Ireland. And this accounts for over half the total number of Bronze Age horns that have been found so far in Europe and the Middle East. To give you an idea, when the horns were blown, they probably made a noise similar to a didgeridoo. Now I'm going to introduce you to the Loch-na-Shad trumpet from County Armagh, and it dates back to about 100 BC. It's described as a magnificent trumpet, and it's one of the finest surviving horns of the European Iron Age. And it was discovered during drainage works at the site of a former lake. That's where it gets its name, the Loch-na-Shad or Loch-na-Shade. Alongside it were 3 other horns, which unfortunately have since been lost. So to give you an idea, to describe it for you, during the 1st century BC, that's where it comes, that's when it's been dated from. It measures 6 feet in length, and it's made from curved and riveted sheets of bronze. The decorative flange at the end of the instrument is covered in an abstract floral design, which is executed in repose ornamentation. In other words, it's hammered out from the inside. It's been suggested that originally there may have been a second attached stem piece that would have lengthened the trumpet and given it an overall S-shaped profile. Now the function, no one is sure, but the original function is uncertain, and it may have been used, and probably was used during special ceremonies and possibly even during war. There are numerous classical accounts which detail how the Gauls and other continental Celtic tribes used similar bronze trumpets as war horns. For example, around 60 to 30 BC, the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote this description of the Celtic war horns. Their trumpets, again, are of a peculiar barbarian kin. They blow into them and produce a harsh sound which suits the tumult of war. Now here's one that's distinctly Irish, and it's got a distinctly Irish name too, the Brian Boru harp. It's also known as the Trinity harp. The harp is one of Ireland's national symbols, and its image has been used on Irish coinage and its state insignia. And according to the 18th century antiquarian Charles Valency, this harp was once owned by High King Brian Boru, who died in 1014. The instrument is intricately carved, and it bears the O'Neill coat of arms. There are those who dispute that Brian Boru had it. We just don't know for sure. So I'm going to now, I said to you earlier, I would give you an opportunity to see and hear the instruments being played. So here's a clip from, it's a late night show in Ireland, and you will get a chance to see and hear the instruments. So enjoy this.
All the one you referred to, which is over 4,000 years old.
All right, let's have a look at what you have here now. What is this?
That is a reproduction of a bronze horn from County Antrim. There are two like this one in existence. One is in the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin, and the other is in the Ulster Museum in Belfast. They can both be seen there. And this is an exact reproduction.
Now, can you play this?
I can.
Off you go.
Okay. I'll play a slow air type sound because this instrument has a beautiful voice.
How did they make this particular instrument?
They cast it using a 2-part clay mould with the centre core held in position by little bronze pins.
When was this made? I mean, the original.
The original was made somewhere between 900 BC and 800 BC. It's about 2,900 years ago, approximately.
And they had the casting technology to do that?
They had better casting technology than we have now.
We found it difficult to reproduce what they had made.
Well, this one is a bit heavier than the originals, and it's not made the same way. It's made using what we call lost wax, or cire perdue, which is a different technique.
Okay, let's move down, because we have some more instruments here. That one, if you like, is, it could be a modern instrument. Nothing terribly unusual to it. But when we look at what's on this table,
I'll just leave this one
Completely
here.
different. Now, what's next? This one.
Now, what's next is this one, which to my mind is the finest of all the prehistoric instruments of Ireland from a visual and an audio point of view.
How old
See
is this?
that? The original instrument is in the National Museum in Dublin. It comes from County Down. It's approximately 150 years before Christ. So it's 2,150
What was
years
it
old.
used for?
This was most likely a concert instrument. We have references in the legends of music for healing. It may have been used for that.
Okay, let's hear it.
It has a very rich sound and a lovely harmonic series. Okay.
Okay, Simon, just think about this. This has not been heard, that sound,
That
since
sound's not
before
been
the
heard.
time of Christ.
That sound hasn't been. The original one was played very briefly in the 1950s with the National Symphony Orchestra, and I'm trying to find out more about that.
Okay.
Other than that, no.
Now, this next instrument, of similar sort of curvature, but used in a very different way. Let's take it
In a
up.
very different way.
Now,
Now, this is the famous Loch Nashade trumpa. Again, the first reproduction. If you're in the National Museum in Dublin, you can see the original, and it's shaped like that. See, you'll see it on display in the Treasury Room.
and what was this used for?
This was undoubtedly a war trumpa. This was used to intimidate. It was used to lead an army into battle. Now, there may have been 100 of these in a line, and the army may have been 5,000 men. And as they marched forward, these led them into battle so that the other army would be terrified, and the army coming behind would be brave and strong, providing you played the right sound.
Okay, let's play a war sound.
Okay, now you've got to imagine that there's 100 of these, and there's a huge army coming behind. So here we go.
Enough! I'm terrified.
Yeah.
I'm terrified.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Now, of course, you can use that same instrument for playing a beautiful fanfare if the king and queen came into the hall, and you can play what we call a shock wave on it, which is so loud that it would hurt your ears if you played it for more than a second or two.
okay, what's this one?
This is called the Mayophone. It's the first reproduction of the bacon horn. Now, the bacon horn was found in a bog just outside Knock in 1791. It's made of yew, and it's got a binding of bronze ribbon around it.
How
It's a
old
very
was
fancy
the original?
The original was early medieval, around 700 AD.
Okay, let's hear it. This has got a reed, and it's, if you like,
It's got
modern instruments wouldn't be terribly different in some ways.
In some ways, it's unique because it's more like the big trumpets in that it has no finger holes to make notes. The notes are made by the length of the tube. You normally only find that in trumpets and horns, but this is a double reed instrument, a bit like a very early bassoon.
Let's hear it.
So. Great jazz instrument. It's a great jazz instrument.
Okay, finally, let's put that back on here.
Yeah. I'm going to bring it to New Orleans.
Right, now,
Now
this one here, this again is a reproduction, but the original bits are extant.
They are, absolutely, and they're hugely important because the original bits that survive are the pipes from here up. There's actually 11 pipes surviving. 6 of them are complete and were found together. And the way they were found in the bottom of a Fulloch Fia, which is like an ancient cooking place, where you make a trench in the ground, you fill it with water, and you put in hot stones until the water boils, and then you can boil up something like a pig in it, you know.
Okay.
And there were lots of them all around Ireland.
How old was the original of this?
The original of this is dated, proven at 4,134 years ago,
Wow.
which is plus or minus 30 years. It's incredibly important.
And you're going to let me try and play this?
Please, now you get to be the first to make this sound publicly
In 4,000
more
years?
than 4,000 years.
Okay.
I hope there isn't a curse on them.
I'll try another one.
Try another one. Lovely. There you go.
4,500 years.
Yeah. You see, what's really important, what's vital about these, it's not so much the find itself, those beautiful wooden pipes that are that age, it's the way they were presented in the find, in the fireplace, the cooking place. The fact that it's an actual scale that we're given. It's like a time capsule, because each pipe contains a particular note, and then we were shown them presented.
So we know perhaps the scale they used, which is different to our modern scale.
It's a little different. It's actually quite similar, but we know a scale from that long ago,
All right.
which is absolutely unique in the world.
It's fascinating stuff. Simon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
May I mention,
Yeah.
just before I go, tomorrow we're having a signing in the National Museum of Ireland in Kildare Street in Dublin, where you can see these and you can see the originals, and next week in Kenny's Bookshop in Galway.
In Galway. Very good.
Thank you
Simon,
so
thanks
much.
a million. All the best. Simon Maguire.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So I hope you enjoyed that. It's wonderful that we have been able to reclaim all of those instruments from bogs, and there's invaluable information that has been possible to find from them. So music continues today, and here's our local session in O'Shea's Old Inn every Sunday night, or at least before the pandemic. And sessions have been going on in O'Shea's now for decades, and hopefully we'll be back within the next few weeks. That's just some of the regular members there now. So in one sense, it's a community of music. The Irish word for his session, they're informal gatherings, and in general the idea is that someone starts a tune, and if you know it, you join in, and then if you don't, the basically good etiquette would require that you don't play along until a tune comes along that you do know how to play. Now there are sessions, some of them are quite closed, it can be by invitation only, but the one on O'Shea's is an open session, and anyone who is able to play Irish music is welcome. Sometimes there's leaders, sometimes it's less formal. And at times there'll also be singing, and also people may take the opportunity to play a slow air, for instance, or someone would display a particular talent. It's also great from the point of view of dancing, because a lot of music only makes sense if you realize that the music was originally played so that people could dance to it. So there's an intricate, and a historic context in which the two are linked. I'm going to go on now to the topic of musical development and competition, and I'm going to focus on two specific areas. One we refer to historically as Éineacht Éireann, and the other is the group that has the job in modern times to promote Irish music and dance, Comhaltas. Now we can only speculate on the ways that people were taught to play music and the role of music in society as far back as, say, the Neolithic Age or even beyond that, and the Bronze Age we just don't know. There's no existing written records to inform us. What we do know comes from the oral tradition passed down from generation to generation, and it was put to paper in the literary period which began in Ireland around the 5th century AD. From the legends we know, and from the oral tradition, we know that there used to be Tailteann Games. The Tailteann Games would be similar to the Olympics, and they predate the Olympics by anything between 500 and 1,000 years, depending upon the date. Some say they were established around 1800 BC. Now, they were open to Celtic peoples from all over the world. They were founded according to a legend, which is recorded in a book called the Book of Invasions, written in the 11th to 12th century by Lug Lom Fada. That's an Irish name. Lof Fada just means long arm. And it was founded as a mourning ceremony for the death of his foster mother, Tailteann, in County Meath, and they were called after her. That's where Tailteann comes from. Now, the event was held during the last fortnight of July as part of a festival with 3 functions. One was honouring the dead, the second was proclaiming laws for the country, and the third then was games and festivities to entertain. Now, we know about the games that there's written records to show that they were held from the 6th century onwards, and they were held until the period around 1169, 1171, and ended because Ireland was invaded by the Normans, who put an end to a lot of social and other life that existed in Ireland for a long time. Now, the final part of the Éineach festival, Éineach just means assembly, or a national assembly. You had games then of mental and physical ability. The physical aspect of the games included things like long jump, high jump, running, hurling, spear throwing, boxing, contests in sword fighting, archery, wrestling, swimming, and chariot and horse racing. The mental ability competitions included strategy, chess, singing, dancing, music, and storytelling, along with craft competitions for goldsmiths, jewelers, weavers, and armourers. So Ireland has had a long and varied history, and a sad history in many ways, but Ireland has always fought back to recover, and the last attempt at this began with what we know as and we call it the Gaelic revival that began in the 19th century, and I'm going to look particularly at the period from 1880 onwards, because it's still continuing. There's a lot, the language has still to be restored fully, a lot of other literature, culture, arts, and all of this is in the process now of change. It's probably going to take hundreds of years. As you can imagine, it took over the best part of 1,000 years to destroy. So let's not expect that we're going to change all of that in a lifetime. It's going to take many lifetimes. And the work is progressing. There are more schools in Ireland today teaching Irish than ever before. So the Gaelic revival that accelerated in the 1880s, it was a project designed to reverse what we call the Anglicisation of Ireland. That process had begun when the Normans arrived in 1167, and it was accelerated in the early 17th century during the Tudor period in Ireland. Then in the early 19th century, the introduction of a national school system that set out to replace the education that was received by Irish people from their community and the extended family, often through what were known in Ireland as hedge schools, because for most of the 18th century, for instance, it was illegal for Irish people to be educated. So people who could teach used to do it, and they would bring groups of kids behind hedges, basically, places where you could hide, because if you were discovered, teachers it could be a death sentence for you as a teacher if you were found. Now, the objective of the education system was to teach Irish children English and English history, the English language and English history, because the biggest issue facing England in its attempts to control Ireland at this stage for 600-700 years was the fact that they were not able to overcome the fact that people in Ireland spoke Irish. So now they were determined to do that. So they were going to take people out of their communities, out of their families, put them into purpose-built schools and teach them English. They also wanted to destroy the knowledge that an understanding of Ireland and Irish history, because they would not teach Irish history. And this followed almost 200 years when being Irish was literally a criminal offence. And in one sense, this new plan was seen as being the nail in the coffin for the Irish language and all aspects of Irish culture and history that literally had been maintained underground at great cost to people for hundreds of years. If you were caught doing it, you could lose your life, your liberty, or your land or wealth or whatever else you had. Then, of course, in the 1840s, the Great Hunger or the famine almost completed the job. The million plus who died were from areas in Ireland where the Irish language and culture was strongest. And then the emigration of another 3 million over the following 70 years left Ireland literally unrecognisable. But all was not lost. Organisations emerged in the latter part of the 19th century and beyond with the purpose of getting Irish people involved in reclaiming their heritage, their land, and gaining political independence. So the Irish language and culture, in other words, games, music, dance, art, folklore, literature, etc., were the focus. Independence then for the 26 counties of Ireland, 32 in 1922, under an Irish government, then allowed for new initiatives to be taken. And the one I'm going to focus on here is Comhaltas, Comhaltas Ceoltóirí Éireann. It's an international organisation that was founded in Ireland in 1951, and there's branches here in Boston. Its goal is to preserve traditional Irish music and culture and to make it available for people everywhere to enjoy it. There's over 400 branches worldwide, and Comhaltas is a completely non-partisan organisation, and it's flourishing all over the world today. Now, one of the things that happened with emigration, particularly in the 20th century, was a lot of great musicians from Ireland were forced to emigrate and came to places like Chicago and Boston and New York and San Francisco. I'm going to focus just on one, Joe Cooley, and I'm going to play some music, and then I'll explain to you why this was undertaken. So that was the great Joe Cooley. A producer in Ireland, Tony McMahon, a very famous musician as well, and later a producer for TV in Ireland. He knew that Joe Cooley was dying from cancer, so he arranged that session in Laheffy's Bar in County Galway in November 1973. Unfortunately, Joe died a month later at St. Luke's Hospital in Dublin, but at least we have a final farewell to him there. So now I'm going to bring it all together. As we know, as I tried to explain to you throughout, Irish music and dance and culture has existed since people set foot on Ireland. And the one thing about Irish music is that it's always been made accessible to people. There's always been people encouraging, there's always been people teaching. I don't think there's a country in the world, that has it so deep rooted within its tradition. And some of it goes back, as I said at the very beginning, to the old laws on hospitality, which essentially meant that every single family in the country were a little unit of entertainment in themselves. And I often explain to people the reason why, because a lot of times people ask me, like, what is it about the Irish that makes them so hospitable, and why they sing and dance and laugh so much? and a lot of it is the continuity that goes back to that time. So this here is a wonderful piece here. It was the biggest open air event to record this wonderful tune, and it got everybody involved, as you will see. So enjoy this. So I hope you all enjoyed that little trip through Irish history and through Irish music. I said at the beginning that I would play you a tune called St. Patrick's Day to end the event. It's a jig. Unfortunately, I hit my finger with a hammer, and not much I can do about it right now. So anyway, it's not the best when you're playing something like a whistle. So St. Patrick's Day. So I'd like to thank the Nantucket Music School for inviting me to help make St. Patrick's Day a day that is inclusive of Irish music and Irish history. And I would encourage you all to consider taking up an instrument. There's no exams. If you just have that inkling that you want to play something and you'd like to entertain and play music with people, just go and do it. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and thank you.